You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the training ground, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. We've got a very exciting show for you today, so let's get started. This show is brought to you today by our friends at Naked Armor Razors and Wet Shave Gear. Are you guys tired of shilling out money every month for plastic cartridges with blades that wear out after just a few uses? Convenience is a great thing, but it seems like sooner or later they're going to be asking for subscriptions for everything, like underwear and toilet paper. That's just one of the many reasons why I enjoy owning a straight razor from Naked Armor. No worrying about whether or not I'll outrun my subscription or whether or not shipping will be delayed when I'm low on blades. You buy one blade, that's it. Made with care out of the highest quality steel, these blades are intended to last you a very long while. I'm planning on handing mine down to my oldest son when he starts shaving. And because you're not throwing these blades away casually, you'll end up doing your part to help the environment, and you'll end up saving yourself around $1,000 over a 4-year period. More if you shave your head like I do. Right now, my listeners get 15% off of anything in their online store by going to nakedarmorrazors.com and entering coupon codes Kings15. That's KINGS 15. Don't wait to start enjoying the highest quality shave you'll ever give yourself. nakedarmorrazors.com. Now, on today's show, I'd like to start discussing some virtues with everyone. Over the past 7 episodes, they've been amazing. And learning how to speak to you has been a humbling experience. We're about to launch the website in earnest, which will feature training materials suited for businesses and organizations to train their business leaders and their other constituents. We're also looking to build a community and building this organization forward into something that can help guide current and future men. It's going to be a powerful thing. We want them to be better leaders, better men, and affect the people around them in better ways. And in doing so, we've done some reflection. I want today's message to glow, like a beacon of hope, because we've spent the past 2 months discussing how we've gotten where we are, and it's largely been a rallying call. Now, don't get me wrong, we still need to rally. And we need to do it soon. But I want to show you that things are incredibly salvageable, and that no matter what you might think about the world today, there's still a lot of good going on. So today, I want to cover 2 topics. We're going to highlight some real men out there in the media sphere that you may or may not have already heard of. I want to highlight why these men should be applauded for the men that they are, the sacrifices they're making. And I want to break down how they personify what we've been discussing since this show's inception. The second thing I want to discuss is virtue. I want to discuss one of them in particular. I want to discuss faith. It comes in several philosophies, from Greek and Roman philosophers. It's mentioned in Christianity, Buddhism, and more. Faith, it seems, transcends these religious and philosophical boundaries, and it is of particular importance to men. First up, a story from across the pond. On April 20th, 2021, 33-year-old Aaron Gray of Prestonton, Denbighshire in England saved 7 people in an early morning fire. He was caring for his 3-year-old son at the time, getting up at 5 a.m. to get him some milk, when he noticed the flames outside and ran out to assist. He rushes over and alerts the 2 adult women to the danger by physically assaulting their front door. I mean, kicking, banging on it, making a huge ruckus. The house was starting to erupt in flames by the time they came out, And at that point, Mr. Gray then helped the 5 children present escape the property. What a man. Ladies, take note of dudes like this. Dude was up at 0500 hours in order to feed his young child. For those of my listeners who don't have kids, this is extremely normal, all right? Like it happened today for us. I don't usually help with this part of the morning prep because I'm either getting ready for work or I actively get my kids excited, like when they see me, and that effectively kills the chance for anyone to go back to sleep for a little bit afterwards. Like a small baba and mommy cuddles usually gets my wife a few extra hours of sleep if she does it correctly, right? I don't usually help in that situation. They see me and they want to party, right? But think of the level of attention that this guy keeps just on a daily basis, like his active, his sphere of influence, so to speak, his awareness. To register a growing fire from outside while he's attending his kid at 0500, right? Now, if it were a newborn, I get it. Like your mind gets time to wander, like outside your periffs, when they're just taking a bottle. But at 5 a.m., the kid's likely pulling on and it's at 5 a.m. and he's 3 years old, right? So he's probably pulling on a sippy cup. So you don't even have to wake up completely. Like you can zombie walk to the fridge and get that job accomplished, right? So the fact that for this dad to be aware of anything outside of his zone is a testament to his game. Then he rushes outside to save the day. No hesitation. According to the article, 5 more minutes of this, or 5 more minutes later, and this story has a very different ending. So set this man up on the pedestal of manhood. He has earned his place. Second story, January 29th, 2021, a 69-year-old man fights off an armed robber while at the ATM machine. The man's name was not been released at this point in the article. This older gentleman felt the assailant casing him, early on. The guy was standing very close for either waiting for the ATM, like normally, or even just with COVID going on. Just this guy was way too close. Now, this much larger man walks up behind the elderly victim and stands, quote unquote, uncomfortably close, as described by the potential victim. After the ATM withdrawal happens, the elderly man turns and is confronted by his assailant, who is now holding a knife. The video can be seen at the website in the show description, so I'll have that link for you guys there. A fight ensues, and while it's not what I would call graceful, it is effective. The assailant isn't expecting resistance at all, and he panics at the time it's taking to carry out this robbery, so he bolts. So I want you guys to check out the stones on this 69-year-old man. This guy's easily got 100 pounds on him, and the fight is still even. You see in the fight that the old man locks his arms up, keeping himself effectively from getting grappled by the assailant. Now, I honestly didn't see the knife in the video, but given how close that these guys do get for a little bit during this fight, I'm willing to bet that the assailant didn't want to use it. And in any case, I want to tell you, let's put this man up on the pedestal. Next, back to April 20th, 2021. I hope everyone has heard or seen this video already, but I got to bring it up. This is one of my favorite stories from the past week, or the past couple weeks. 2 kids attempt an armed carjacking in broad daylight. There's only one of the kids who's armed, and he's got a firearm. This was their second attempt for over the day, and this man is having none of it. In the video, you can see this guy taking his time to prepare, and then he strikes. He wrestles out of the muzzle area where the gun is pointing, and then he body slams this kid. Now, this was one worthy of The Rock. And I don't want to pick on this kid because it was a kid that got rocked. Yeah, but I'm looking at this not as a kid that got body slammed. I'm looking at this as a potential armed robber. Because clearly the guy with the gun to his chest wasn't going to card this kid. right? It was just assailant or me in that case for him. Now, this body slam takes the kid painfully to the ground, where he proceeds to squeal in epic fashion. Now, his friend, meanwhile, starts begging the victim, quote unquote, to let his friend go. And at this point, the gun's on the ground, and the victim lets the kid up, and the kid promptly flees the area. I've got to say, I wouldn't have been so generous. The kids get picked up later, but let's look at the man in this scenario. By far my favorite story of the past week. Cool under pressure. This guy fights off a gun to his chest. Now, let's not get it twisted, folks. Regardless of how much training people may have or as confident as any of us could talk about this situation, you never know. Not until you experience it. This guy's got ice in his veins, and he's a kinder soul than me. I don't think I'd have let them run away for this, right? Like, this guy showed strength and temperance, or maybe mercy, again, depending on how you want to look at this thing, right? But this guy takes the cake. Put him on the pedestal. And lastly, if anyone's got a drink in hand, I ask you, pour one out for a fallen brother. An article from March 30th, 2021. A Chicago man dies saving his children from a riptide while down in the Florida Panhandle on the Gulf Coast. Pete Rosengren and his kids, ages 14, 12, and 7, all run to the beach before they could really assess water conditions. They missed the signs that say don't go in the water, it's dangerous. And it seems that they got they get pulled along with their younger friend of theirs, age 9. He also got pulled in. For those of you who don't know, a rip current or a rip tide is a vein of water that swiftly flows from the shore out to deep water. Now imagine the launcher that we used to have on our Hot Wheels tracks when we were kids, with the two wheels spinning in opposite directions, right? They meet, and then, they meet your car, they squeeze it, and then they send it shooting, and they flying through. It's the same concept here, only with a flowing medium, and you are the car. Now, these are hazardous even for seasoned swimmers. So keep that in mind moving forward. When Mr. Rosengren saw that the kids were struggling in the water, he went in after them. The kids were trying to help each other, and they weren't doing all too well for it. Now, Pete was able to save the kids and their 9-year-old friend, but unfortunately, he was not able to save himself. After he was recovered, he was rushed to an area hospital where he was later pronounced dead. This man should receive special honors wherever the souls of the brave go when their bodies are laid to rest. Pete knew what he was risking. When kids are involved, it's an easy decision to make. But like our example with the carjacking, we spoke about just a minute ago, until rubber meets the road, you never really know. This man passed his test. He risked everything to protect his children. The people who need your protection the most, that's who he was protecting, his kids. Now, Pete not only saved them, but he saved their other friend, the 9-year-old, who now has a future. These boys, whatever they go and do, it will be because Pete Rosengren chose to save them. Put him on the pedestal, and may he stay there in eternity. May he rest in peace. Now, why do I bring these men up? Strictly speaking, I'm doing it because for the past few months, I've mentioned week after week that there are forces out there who do not have our best interests in mind. I've mentioned attacks on traditional masculinity from a cultural perspective down to the family unit. I've leaned hard on the cardinal responsibilities, all 4 of them, because if we can get back to fundamentals, we can rebuild. Now, masculinity itself doesn't need to be rebuilt, but our understanding of it does. Some of us have never lost that understanding. Great. But in today's world, we need to filter out these contaminants that are clouding something that should be clear enough to drink. Distillation down to a raw product, the cardinal responsibilities, is not going to be enough. It's a good starting point, and it's not enough for you or even me to just rest on our laurels and claim that it's good enough, because it's not. We need to be better. We are called the North American Kings because our mission is to create better men, not adequate men. In some cases, adequate might be better, but again, we are looking to create something more, right? There are plenty of guys out there getting some of this right, but half-baked is not going to fix this crazy world. And it's not going to reduce the violence that we're seeing out there. We lost 2 kids this week, one in Chicago, one in Columbus. Both were kids committing various acts of violence, and both ended up on the wrong end of justice. Now, regardless of how things look or in these situations or how things went down, no one knows where the fathers in both of these situations were. Mom, in both cases, came out and talked to the press, but dad hasn't. I'm willing to bet dad wasn't there. It's sad to think that things probably would have turned out differently had these men stepped up and done their duties. Now, I mentioned these men before who stand upon the pedestal of manhood because they are men and they are out there taking things seriously. Despite everything going on right now, manhood is fighting to get out. In desperate situations, gentlemen, it's winning. It's why I have faith, which again is what we're going to be talking about today at length. The virtue of faith, the secular distillation of what faith is elusive. It's difficult to understand for some people, even the ones who are trying very hard to understand it. Faith, however, is something that we should be full of because of men like this. Men are out there. I mean, we take crap treatment in silence because we are strong. We shrug it off because we feel that anyone calling for men to be more feminine are dumb. And people or companies that want to make us feel wrong for being masculine, they don't know who they're messing with. Right? We should have an amazing amount of faith because the goodness trapped within the shell of traditional masculinity is as pure a truth as you can get. We can see it in the men who have embraced it, those guys that we just need. We feel a pull, a magnetic draw to follow. But we can also see it in little boys as they start to realize what's inside them. Any of you guys see little boys out there who look at their hands like, man, I just did that. That was so cool. And they look up at you, and I've had it with all 3 of my kids so far. They all look up at you. Like, I can't believe I just did that. Was that so cool? Yeah, absolutely, buddy. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing when they start to realize what they have inside them. These are reasons to have faith. Now, faith as a virtue is altogether different, though. So let's get started. First, let's get the big question out of the way. What is a virtue? All of the definitions that I've been able to wrangle up through research or through personal experience and study is that the differentiating factor between anything else and virtue is that virtue is in itself an objective moral good. Like, this is a debated landing point. Like, there are various places where people want to land on this subject matter. I am inclined to settle here because several schools of thought and of philosophy have settled here as well. And because of those people I've discussed this episode with before we recorded, this is the it resonates with them. It's like that pure truth that we talked about. Like, they can feel it like a bell. So for those situations, I think this works. Some examples from Aristotle: courage, temperance, wit, friendliness, ambition. We've got the Christian values: temperance, prudence, courage, justice, faith, hope, love. There are a lot of virtues out there. We're going to discuss several of them together because ultimately men need to be practicing as many of these as we can because they're moral good, because they are objective moral goods, each one of them. So as we improve on each one of these things, we start being virtuous people. We start practicing these in the realm of our manly responsibilities. We will start to affect the world around us. The people will see us that we interact with. Our kids will start to see what they need to be or what they need to pursue. And ultimately, it will be a much better thing for everyone. A practical example, kindness. To actively deny kindness would be considered by all, I think, it would be a moral evil, right? But let's look at this as in another direction. Let's take one thing. Let's take pedophilia, right? Like, we're not going to talk about it in length, so don't get uncomfortable, right? But pedophilia, can we agree that this is an objectively evil thing? Does anyone want to argue against that? I don't think so. So the question should be, and it does get raised, what makes pedophilia evil? Right? Cultural relativism? We say so. We say it's evil, but it's a losing argument because there's going to be some new age philosopher that says, well, it depends on the culture that you're looking from. Right? This is a morally weak argument. What's to keep us from going out and forming a society where pedophilia is acceptable? It's not going to happen, right? Because we objectively feel that it's wrong. Everybody does, like writ large. In either case, the cultural relativist, that argument doesn't answer the question, what actively makes pedophilia evil? We're left with two answers, right? It's either a biological trigger that would need to be so deeply ingrained that it would transcend almost every culture in the world, or that moral truth has to come from something greater. Whatever that is, I will leave that to you. Now, the opposite of pedophilia, in my opinion, might be justice. And I say that as a question because, again, I'm throwing a virtue at this, but justice is one of Aristotle's 12 virtues. And I think again, it makes sense that justice would be the opposite of pedophilia, whatever that justice looks like. So there is one distinction that I want to clarify before we move forward. According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they make the point that a virtue is an excellent trait of character. To continue the quote, it is a disposition well entrenched in its possessor, something that, as we say, goes all the way down. Now, to be honest, I don't think that this encompasses virtue enough. It rests on someone's core feelings on an issue, where this, to me, that's more of a character trait. Right? Take inclusivity, for instance. Some people feel the need to embrace inclusivity and diversity deep down to their roots. Now, while this may be a good thing, it's not an objective moral good, regardless of the certainty that some people feel towards it. Right? Like, it's a strong character trait. That's important, but it's not an objective moral good. It is not something of virtue. All right? Now, the point that the Stanford definition makes that I do agree with is that virtue is free of utilitarian need. Right? There's no self-interest in the practice of a virtuous act. And I've discussed this with other theologians, and it rings true. The decision isn't made because it happens to be helpful right now. Do you do the right thing because it's the right thing, or because it's beneficial for some other reason? Right? That's a delineating factor right there. Another example, if your wife has gained weight and you notice, and she looks, she asks whether she looks fat, what's the virtuous response? Right? You have the virtue of honesty, right? Yes, honey, you've gained a little weight and I can see it. You tell me how that goes. Right? You weigh that against the virtue of kindness. Now, I don't think so. I think you look great, honey. Now, men, in almost all cases, you pick option 2. All right? Now, if it's extremely obvious, like clothes aren't fitting anymore, and your wife knows that you mean well, like, go for it. But always remember the harm that your words can do. I'll be honest. I've gained a little bit of weight in 2020. Right? I think everybody has. So I've had that conversation, like, honey, I think we both need to be cutting back. Like, we need to start taking care of ourselves a little bit better. That was coming from an objective place, and my wife knew he meant well, right? that's the way you have that conversation. But in this case, you would think the virtues showcased would be mutually exclusive. You can either be honest or you can be kind. However, brutal honesty is just that. It's brutal. Now, is there morality in brutality? Now, rather, the debate continues to rage on whether or not we should focus on all virtues at once or just one at a time. Now, to answer this, I would ask you to focus on the goal. What is the predominant good in the situation? Like, what is the most good you can do? Which set of words or actions will do the most good versus do the most damage? Now, in this, you can help yourself decide on how to be the most virtuous person that you can. Now, faith is a virtue, is very broad. Now, I will speak about this from a secular perspective because even without the theological perspective on this, these virtues still yield moral good when actively practiced. You can see it for yourself. Now, there's a fascinating article by Tim Chappell, published in Religious Studies, Volume 32, Issue 1, back in 1996, titled, "Why is Faith a Virtue?" The link will be in the show description. It's a JSTOR journal link, which is behind a paywall. Now, with a Google account, which, let's be honest, everybody has today, you'll be able to read this for free. So it's definitely worth the slight effort of signing in with your Google account. I absolutely loved this article because, objectively, let me just be honest, it reaffirmed what I'd been working on in composition of this episode, right up to the end where we have a distinct break point where I'm going to make a counterpoint. In this article, Mr. Chappell points to two things that faith as a virtue provides. He says that it leads us to two basic goods, which is our definition, again, the same title. It's a different title for our definition of an objective moral good. These things are truth and quote unquote practical hope. Now, faith can lead us to truth. Now, it's a byproduct of this process, but we know what the definition of truth is. It's an account of what is, free of bias or interpretation. I use this all the time in business, in troubleshooting, in problem solving, right? We want to look at factual matters. Now, in these days, factual matters are being colored with perception. An account for what is, however, is another distillation necessary in order to address this problem. What was the action? What were the words that were said? What was the situation in truth? Not what did it cause? Not what did those things cause? Now, faith is a conduit for Chappell's practical hope. Now, I've been describing this for weeks as a tangible benefit to having a virtuous faith, but practical hope is an active shield against its counterpoint. And this is, I think, the biggest part of this. I came upon this at trying to think about how I would present this to you folks, found this article where it said the exact same thing. The counterpoint to practical hope is despair. Now, the article put it more eloquently, but let's be honest, that's not really how we do things here, right? Despair, when unbalanced, is going to be your worst enemy. Now, Michael Knowles often quotes G.K. Chesterton. Chesterton is noted for saying, "There is a thought that stops thought. That is the only thought that ought to be stopped." Now, I've heard this from Knowles time and time again, and I've never really had, a thing that it would land on in the right comparison until trying to think about this. So even before reading this article, I landed on despair as an emotional force that can freeze you in the moment. The thought that stops thought. Men are meant to be resilient to this type of emotional onslaught, especially in dire situations. Being able to regulate through crazy situations is our strong suit. Now, more than that, being able to see the situation rationally is our best offense. Secular faith or belief in your purpose or plan or reason can help you clearly see in these situations. Now, submitting to despair, or for our purposes, having a lack of faith in anything, can take away your autonomy. It makes you malleable and vulnerable at the same time, which is a losing combination. With no faith, everything is up for debate. It puts you back in that moral relativist sphere. And with zero faith, everything can be true. And therefore, you risk your autonomy. How could that be? If everything is true, you are at the mercy of time and fortune, right? You will be influenced by the first impulse or the first director that you will encounter, the first thing that pushes you in one direction or another. Now, I've met people who have shared this story, with me personally. With little to no faith, they were led by someone else into either prosperity or to ruin, right? Some people got lucky and they were led by good people. Now, to have faith of your own in conviction or a person or something, it gives you a tether to your true self. And with that tether, you can start to see things for what they truly are. You can see what's really in front of you. Faith, both secular or religious, requires some modicum of trust. Now, that's the thing that people struggle with sometimes, but it requires a willing submission. It almost feels like gratitude, right? And as this submission into the situation occurs, the weight of your circumstances gets lifted. This allows you control over everything else. Like, what do you control? What don't you control? The stuff that you don't control, it doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant. You toss that aside, right? You have the strength now to do so because you have faith. It gives you the strength to put those things away. Again, all it takes is faith in something, but that's enough. Now, this is the practical side. There's also some very implicit benefits. There's a strength that you can build. It's a strength of will, and that can grow from a virtuous faith. This can help you see things through, whether or not you're navigating roadblocks. It can get you around those things that would otherwise be crippling. You're less susceptible to the environment and the factors that might be in your path. Now, faith is a virtue. To have it versus not have it is an objective good, right? That's what I'm trying to get out here, right? This is where I break from Mr. Chappell's argument. His conclusion is that there must be God in order for faith to be a virtue, but I don't think that's the case. For those of you who don't have faith in anything, those people are lost. They're without guides. They're susceptible to the whims of the universe. We're talking about, we've talked about autonomy. They don't have it. Being without faith is the antithesis of autonomy. And for you, it means you can't have the autonomy without the means to do anything with it. In the book of James, chapter 2, verse 14 through 26, they speak about faith paired with action. In our case, the ability to do something with one's will. In verse 26, it reads, So then, as the body without the spirit is dead, also faith without action is dead. I think that one person having faith in anything is better off, right? What they do with it isn't implicitly tied to the benefits of faith overall. All right. So to have faith in anything is better to not have faith at all. That's my personal belief. And here's why. Right? If I choose to have faith in, say, socialism, the political philosophy that has crushed nations around the world since its inception, it's never worked, right? I am better off having faith in that than in nothing, because if I have faith in nothing, I lose my personal agency. I am no longer responsible for myself. The fact that actively participating in a meritocracy like America is better for me than living in a socialist system, it doesn't change the fact that agency is better than not having one at all, right? It still requires faith in the system rather than just an empirical understanding of it. So faith itself is the point, regardless of the moral good that if I believe in something that's bad, right? Now, I'm not saying those are good situations to be in either, but it is a better situation than to be completely faithless. Now, First Thessalonians talks about this. What your faith is in will be the predominant factor as to whether or not it works as a virtue. That's their thought. That's the Bible's thought. I mean, part of faith is struggling with it, right? That's the core of of every religion out there. Like you're going to struggle with your faith. I mean, if it just was good and always was, it's not a gift, right? So it mirrors the message from the book of James. Faith is an act, and we must act on it for it to truly benefit you as a virtue. Without action, it's just feelings. I disagree with the notion that the focus of our faith determines whether or not it's a virtue or not. Again, be prepared for this when people, look to you and question this, right? But that brings us to our final point in the matter. There is a difference between faith and gullibility, right? Now, I think that faith is finite. There must be a point where that fundamental trust that we talked about, it has to be broken. There's a point where it's possible to break that. And without that breaking point, faith is a lie. It's not faith, it's obedience, and it's not choosing a moral good. Now, we need faith as men, not just for the benefits that you can receive by embracing the philosophical responsibilities of manhood, but it's also good for our well-being. People have religious longings, and we tend to fill it with whatever fits best, theological or otherwise. Take the principles of manhood. Men, have faith. You are not alone. Provide, protect, teach, and discipline. Those principles bind us. Wherever they're mentioned, and I mention them often, you can physically see other men perk up when they hear it. Right? They're subconsciously responding to a fundamental piece of themselves that they recognize in your words. Now, despite what you may hear, I have met an absolute bro this week, totally unsolicited. Right? I've been running an exercise this week. If you guys can't see this from my hands, like I've got oil still covering some of my hands, right? From these exercises that we've been doing. We're excited to show people the progress that we made at this business I'm with. So whenever I see my boss with a group of people, I wait for him to dismiss me, lest he want me to do the TPM song and dance, right? This week we've had several guests from a facility, from a sister facility of ours from a company we just purchased. We're trying to integrate and see how we work with each other. So we've had a lot of strangers at the plant. Now I see my boss with a group of people that I thought were new colleagues. Now, I don't know about you, but in COVID times, I've seen the emergence of what I call COVID rock, paper, scissors. It goes like this. Two people meet. They normally shake hands, and it's such an ingrained habit that we both start to go for it, right? We show paper until we realize that we're not supposed to shake hands anymore. So then we close them immediately to fists, like we're going to pound it, like we're going to save this somehow. So we show rock. But that would be unprofessional, right? We're not going to fist bump random dudes, right? So we settle on the chicken wing. It happens very often, and it's happened consistently since this whole thing dropped. Now, I do this with the leader of the group that my boss is leading around, right? We play this little game, and then I chicken wing this guy, and then I chicken wing the guy right next to him. Now, there's a third gentleman, and he's across the circle from me, so to speak. And, I've got to take a step or two to get to him. And then I see it. Now, there's nothing between me and this guy, but it looks like it's kind of like a mating call, all right? He holds his arms out, bring it in. And in my head, all I heard was, bro. And, I've been working at a plant since all of this COVID started. So who am I to deny a bro a hug, right? So he opens up, bring it in. And I did. I stepped right into it, before things could get weird, oh, it was just a joke. And I hugged the guy. Now it was a bro hug, but still, I mean, we got a laugh, but I'd also got a shocked and surprised look from my boss. He was like, dude, come on. Right? Now, little did I know the reason he was a little worried was because this was a potential customer. It was not someone that we were going to be working with, like definitely. Oops. You know. So we march right through that detail, make them like, let's just power through it. And we walk right out to the line. You know, I missed his cue. He thought he told me the situation. I did not process that correctly. So here we are. So I do the song and dance. We're out by this machine we're rebuilding. And, you know, I talked to him about some systems we're putting in place, some employee training. They asked some quality questions. Like, we do the whole thing. It's a very common conversation. I've had it multiple times. I can rattle that off just quickly. So the conversation is wrapping up, and we got to do the same thing, same setup right out the production floor now. So we chicken wing the leader, chicken wing the guy right next to him, and I turned, same order. I looked right at bro and offered a light apology in case the hug thing earlier got a little weird. And he literally says, dude, holds his arms open, and then he walks into it. I'm like, what? Like, okay, awesome, right? Give the guy another bro hug, which I'm all for. Don't get me wrong, I'm an affectionate guy, but I was not expecting that, like, at all. And all I could see behind him was my boss, who's clearly saying to the account rep, he's like leaning over, he's got his hand out, he's like, what are you doing? And he's looking at the guy like, what's he doing? And so I met a total stranger. Now, I'll be honest with you, I went and clarified with my boss later, and apparently it went fine. He said, Glenn, I don't get it. I was the only one who was weirded out by that. Awesome. You know, like, that could have gone a lot worse. So I met a total stranger who is clearly above this COVID hysteria stuff, right? He was able to show me some grace in a situation that could have been considered very odd at best, right? Men, there are other dudes out there waiting to find like-minded individuals, right? Like-minded souls. And we need to celebrate the men on this pedestal, but we also need to celebrate and seek each other out and support each other. I'll be honest with you guys. I say brother a lot. And now it's brother with a capital B. And I say it for two reasons. One, it's disarming to some folks, right? I try not to use it lightly. Sometimes sometimes I say it a little lightly, but I'm also doing it for a reason. So sure, I'll pepper in dudes, bud, other pronouns, like what have you. But saying brother, in meaning it, it implies a lot more. There are duties associated with this proclamation, right? It's not just a persona thing. Like, you call a guy a brother and he means it. You know, like, you got to be a bro. Like, for real. You got to listen to honestly. You know, we can do a whole episode on just what brotherhood is. You know, you got to listen honestly. You've got to be a support. You've got to actually help out. You know, it is not just a word you say. It's an actual relationship you've decided to build by saying, hey, you're a brother? Yeah. But the second piece of this brother dilemma, I use it as bait. Now, saying brother publicly will tell you who people are around you. Some people who don't feel its meaning will just brush it off. Like, I'm cool with those folks because when they want to learn, they can. You know, like when they're ready. But for others, you get two camps. You get guys or girls who know and see you as an ally now because they understand the meaning. But then you also flush out your detractors. And now, I don't want to call them enemies, but they are people who actively subvert your success or even your jovial mood for the day, right? But they'll make themselves apparent. Now, either way, that's active intelligence you can rely on. Also, high five is an active tool that you can use to identify other men around you who are like-minded, like we are. Now, let's not forget what high fives really are, right? A handshake, let's call it pre-COVID. A handshake was a greeting. A high five was a transfer of energy. Now, Brother Clark used to use this all the time, and he got it somewhat backwards, and I couldn't figure out when I was a college kid back then why it was so funny to see him do this. But I figured it out. Clark used to use a high five is a greeting, which lacks like the punch of like that, like an energy transfer provides. And I laughed hysterically every time I saw it. It was nuts. Clark would do it to his girlfriend, just hi, bang, and just, oh my God, it was so much. It was so funny because that disparity, like I felt that disparity there. But I truly believe high fives are transfers of energy. And here's how I know. Now, I have a maintenance guy at work right now who is super quiet. So naturally, we get along the best, right? But in all seriousness, we don't talk much, but he's a great man. And I know that, right? In a traditional respect. I found this out on some random day last year, and I can't remember when, but I came in a little down. Like did not have it in me that day. For whatever reason, I was not my normal self. That this guy approached me, which does not happen often, and he offered me an unsolicited high five. And in that moment, I knew he understands what a high five really is. He gave me energy, and I appreciate that from him, right? Now, this week has been a crazy faith week for me. As we come up on 2 months of production of the show, we need to temperature check every now and then, right? And see where we're at. Now, the biggest names in podcasting who don't touch this subject directly all too much, they've started talking about manhood. Boom, validation, right? From those on high that this is worth pursuing. Luckily, I have faith in what we're doing, like down into my soul. I've said that before, which has helped us maintain clarity on what's important, and it can, and what we can wait on with regards to this endeavor or the endeavors outside this immediate project. Validation never hurts, but then sometimes, just when your sense of faith gets strained, you get help. I had an old boss reach out to me, someone who I felt a lot of pride working for. He was a man. He still is. Now, this man I respect, who was almost one of the greatest influences I've had to date, said that he admired what we were doing here. Now it might just be encouraging words from someone I respect, but that adds to the faith pool, right? That coupled with our first negative feedback on YouTube, it's been a good week. I gotta admit, the comment, "I can't believe people like you exist," like that's like candy. Right? Now, like I mentioned, men, you are not alone. Right? This person who thinks he can't believe I exist. Yeah, there are a lot of us, right? The fact that we shock people when we put ourselves out there, that just shows how easily this can be won. Right? We're clearly not vocal enough, which is one thing, but either way, it's fuel. Men, we need to use it. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. If you liked this show, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe and follow for free. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, or wherever else you get your content. Good luck out there.